Hello, everybody. I'm Jonathan from Boredom Sated.
And I'm Boris from Boredom Sated.
Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to talk about how to create some famous fantasy characters in Pathfinder 2. We started with, of course, one of the most famous fantasy characters you can get, at least novel-wise, which is Drizzt Do'Urden. His pronunciation of his last name, I've never really been super good with.
Yeah, it's
Or
you have to. I think you have to know Undercommon to do it correctly.
yeah. So, Drizzt is famous for being, of course, the dark elf from uh,
R.A. Salvatore's
R.A. Salvatore's book,
36 novels now.
something like that. 36, 37. They are still coming.
Yeah, yeah.
They are set in the realm of
Forgotten
which one is
Realms.
it again?
Forgotten Realms.
Yes, it's set in Forgotten Realms, one of the more famous D&D realms of existence. You've got it's where it's where a lot of the famous games take place and things like that. You've got a lot of the major cities that get talked about. He is known as an incredible fighter. He is known for dual wielding scimitars, and he is known for basically surviving things that he shouldn't reasonably survive. Because of this, what we wanted to do is we wanted to try to do a relatively good job of creating him for Pathfinder 2. Now, one thing about it is Pathfinder 2 stats are very balanced and can get very high. So if you look at any of the old versions of him, he maxes out at a dex of 20. He doesn't have amazingly high stats on a lot of places. Whereas just making a basic character in Pathfinder 2 at level 20, you're going to have good stats.
Right.
Like, you're going to have maybe one bad stat total, two if you really try to.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it was really easy to bring him up to be actually better stat line than what he is because of that. But we will discuss. But getting him to his stat line, even though for D&D it might seem, wow, it's amazing. Dexes are 20, int and wisdom are at 17. Charisma, I believe, was like 16. Strength was his lowest score, but Con was also at like 16. So those in D&D are phenomenal stats. In
Yes.
in Pathfinder 2, it's easy to get that without a
Yeah.
problem by the time you're 20th.
So what we decided to do was we decided to make a 20th level version of what we would make as Drizzt. Now, famously, Drizzt is known as a fighter who then ended up becoming a ranger. And while he was down in his time in the depths of the dark of the Underdark,
Yeah.
in the Underdark, there's definitely an argument that can be made that he had a level or two in Barbarian. Now, multi-classing in Pathfinder 2 is very difficult, and technically, because of the way that Pathfinder 2 does their multi-classing, we can't multi-class into Fighter or Barbarian. So we could start Fighter or start Barbarian and still go Dex, but we couldn't multi-class into it. So that made a decision that had to be made relatively early for us in our choices.
Right. Even though they do have some alternative rule sets in DM, we decided to follow the traditional, not the alternatives. You could do the fighter ranger with the alternative rules, but that sort of takes away from the way Pathfinder 2 is played.
Yeah, but the other problem that we really ran into is the fact that Dark Elf has not actually been made into a character choice yet as one of the elf choices. Now, will it eventually? Probably, but it hasn't been done yet, so we kind of had to play around with that for his traits. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Don't want to go too heavy into it. Now, we also built this separately, so we ended up going with a very different route, and actually, that's the entire reason why this is interesting.
Yes.
I with a full ranger build, because even though he is a fighter who went ranger later in life, I think Ranger fits his character better for the purposes of building it in Pathfinder.
Yep. Yep. Whereas I took a look and all the historical and all the fights he's been in, and because he started as a fighter, I really thought going all fighter gave him the better to hit, the better attack modifiers, and utilizing his skill sets to give him those ranger capabilities was the better, the closer way to the way I envisioned him.
And that's the thing. That's the entire reason why we're making this video, because we decided to do this a slightly different way. Yeah. Both of them are dual wield builds. Now, obviously, one other thing we need to mention is the scimitar. The scimitar does not reasonably dual wield because it is not agile and not finessable.
Right.
Not being agile is fine. We can get around that. It just makes it so that he's not as good with it. However, not finessable makes it so that he really wouldn't be very effective at all. Because we know perfectly well that Drizzt doesn't kill people by doing tons and tons of damage. He kills people by dodging and by getting in those attacks that just get and hit home. He kills people by critting because of the fact that he's incredibly accurate, and by hitting them an enormous number of times until they die. But he's never been known for his massive amount of damage per hit. He's been known for being able to hit and dodging hits in return, which is the reason why, again, it became more difficult, because we had to have his weapons be considered finessable. So what we decided to do was we said, all right, these are still scimitars, but we're going to get rid of one of the rules on scimitar, and we're going to replace it with finessable, and we're going to call it an elven scimitar, or even possibly a dark elven scimitar.
Yes.
And to make up for that, we also gave him among his traits for being a dark elf, we gave him the elven weapon familiarity and those things to make it so that it would make up for this new weapon.
Right. Because you can't have Drizzt, scimitars are just useless, or take away so much with two weapons. He becomes an average fighter at best.
So we got rid of forceful and kept in sweep.
Yeah.
Now you could reasonably go the other way if you wanted to, because again, this is self-created anyway. Now let's get into the meat of this, and start talking about our feats. Now, however you build your character, again, Dex has got to be your high stat. Wisdom, in my opinion, should be the second highest. He's relatively intelligent. He's got a solid constitution. He's charismatic when he wants to be, and his strength has generally never been considered his highest stat, but he's never really been considered weak. If you go based on his old stats, again, the 3.5 stats were, the ones that I saw at least, were 13 strength, 20 dex, 15 or 16 con, 17 intelligence and wisdom, and 15 charisma.
Right. And because the way Pathfinder works out, I ended up with, what I thought would make sense for him was the 20 dex, 18 int, 18 wisdom, con 20, just because you're putting in points because you need to keep the strength low, strength 12, and charisma 18.
Yeah, I went a little different because your con is too high. Con has never been one of his top stats.
I agree.
Intelligence or wisdom should have been higher than that then. My final stat line ended up being 12 strength, 22 dex, 16 con, 18 intelligence, 20 wisdom, and 16 charisma. However, let's get into the feats. So
yes.
I chose Ranger. Basically, that means that he needs to do studied targets, favorite enemy kind of things. And I chose Flurry for this because if you're going to be dual wielding, taking Flurry, especially at high level, makes it so that you can do some dumb things because your attack modifier does not lower by very much.
Right.
So Flurry is massive considering his dual wielding capabilities.
Right. And for the fighter, again, going with the dual weapon capabilities, I grab double slice.
Oh, I didn't even say what my first feat was. I just said
Oh,
flurry for that. My
yeah.
first feat is twin takedown. They're the same basic thing. The difference is though, twin takedown. Both of my attacks count as the same attack modifier, whereas yours don't because
Right.
you're not using a finesse. You're not using an agile weapon. So twin takedown is strictly better, but twin takedown must be used on your studied opponent or your hunted enemy, whereas the fighter doesn't get that. So I have an extra action that I have to spend on my opponent beforehand, which is
Right.
obviously a major downfall to my build. But later in levels, it really stops being stops mattering.
Right. Okay. For second level, what did you grab?
For second level, I decided to go a little bit fun, and I went favored terrain underground. Because he ended up, although he does not spend a lot of time underground, he is a master of that terrain. And when he is down
Right.
there, he's one of the ultimate hunters.
Yes. I did similar items. Just it's not a class feat, but I did similar at second level terrain expertise underground because I gave him the survival. But the class feat I took was intimidating strike, and the reason I took that is because you always in every single fight almost description whenever somebody sees Drizzt fighting first and they see him weaving his scimitars, the words is people are frightened and they're about to face somebody that's far superior. Even Artemis, supposedly the greatest fighter assassin in the world, was impressed when he saw the weaving, the way Drizzt weaved his.
That's fair. That's fair. The problem, of course, is that because of the way that we're going to end up doing the skills, his intimidate doesn't end up becoming that great. But it's still going to be fine. Oh, one
Yeah,
thing we forgot to
yeah.
mention: what background did you go with?
Oh, I went with well, you could go with noble because that's in line, but I actually went with warrior.
See, I decided to go with refugee because he ended up leaving and basically being he needed to he spent a lot of time not really being welcome in a lot of places and running away from his home.
That I mean, I think that makes sense too. I mean,
All of
it's
the ones
it's
I
all
said are all good. They are all going to be dependent
right,
on how you want to do it. Warrior is definitely a good one. Noble also makes sense because he grew up in a noble family, which is again we'll
right,
get to that later. And refugee, I just thought made the most sense based on after the first book.
right. Um, so just before we jump to fourth, I just want to add that his first general feat I took was incredible initiative because he always needs to go first, and any bonus that you can add to his initiative, you really should, in my opinion.
Yeah, I general feats I did not end up choosing to bother with in a lot of cases here, but incredible initiative is definitely one that he would take. He would probably also end up taking some more speed because he is again generally considered very very fast.
Yes.
So he probably would end up taking that. And I mean he's not the toughest guy, but he would probably have either toughness or die hard.
Yep. Definitely.
Anyway, moving on
Okay.
to level
Uh,
4, I took Twin Parry because
so did I.
yeah, it's a very good feat, and also it
Yeah.
fits right along with the way that he goes.
You're
At level
right.
6, I took Skirmish Strike because he is very well known for attacking on the move.
So I took flip. So which is when somebody an enemy targets you with their melee strike, flipping your body into twist somersault, you gain +2 circus and bonus to AC. And I saw, and that's really in line with the way R.A. Salvador describes most of the fights that Drizzt is involved.
Yeah, the thing is that we can't do everything. Like as an example, again, I would love to have that feat, but it is fighter only. Skirmish strike again also goes right along with the way that he describes the fights, but you're not going to have an availability to get that.
No.
So yeah,
Yeah.
like you can't. Nothing's perfect.
Right.
Next, I took blind fighting because if there's
So
one
did I.
thing, there's one thing that Drizzt is very well known for: cloud of darkness. Go
Yep.
in, fight blind. He's better at it than you are.
Yes, and I did the same thing for the same exact reason because that is his one of his most favorite tricks if he thinks his opponent is somewhat tough.
Yeah, or yes, yeah, that he does it against giants, ogres, all sorts of creatures.
Right.
Next,
Yeah.
I took Warden's Step. Obviously, this is more in line with the Ranger. This is more in line with for Warden's Step. You also have to have a good survival, so it's it's a good ability specifically based on being a Ranger.
So I took a certain strike. Even when you don't hit squarely, you can still score glancing blow. Make a melee strike. It gains
Yeah.
the following failure effect.
Yeah,
Your
and
attack deals.
so basically if your main attack hits, you're going to do a little bit of damage from your secondary weapon. And again, that's definitely something that Drizzt definitely like 100% is part of his character.
Right.
I did something very similar with my next one, which is called Second Sting, which has a very similar effect.
Right. So for the 12, I took Twin Repose, which you are benefiting from Twin Parry. A creature within your reach critically fails a strike against you, and you counterattack. So with one of your weapon to try to either disarm or something
Yeah, and
similar.
that's again definitely something that fits in with his character.
Yep.
Like everything we're picking obviously fits well within his character.
Yes, definitely.
After that, Sense the Unseen, because again, this is one of the things that he is very well known for. So Sense Unseen, basically what it does is makes it so that if you failed a perception check to see something, you can still sense that something is in the area, you just don't know where.
Right.
Which again is a very Drizzt thing.
Yep. Now, the next one I took was in line, and I thought it was really important. It's determination, where once per day you can shrug off the effects of spells and conditions in a dire situation, and we've seen this throughout many books. He's either frozen or he's being mind controlled, and one of his friends gets in danger, and especially if it's Cadwin, and he just shreds off the effects and goes in to save them.
Yeah. So next I took next I have Twin Riposte as well in there. Right. Because it is necessary based on his character.
Right. So for the 16th level, I took Double Slice, which gives you 2 attacks for 1 action. If you, Graceful Pause. My bad. The prerequisite is Double Slice. It gives you 2 attacks for 1 action with both of the weapons in your hands, which is again in line with what Drizzt does.
Yeah, well, that's where I went for 18, because 18 Rangers get Impossible Flurry.
Okay.
3 actions make 3 attacks with each weapon.
And for 18,
are made a -4. So all 3 attacks are made at only a -4, which means that your second attacks and third attacks are still pretty solid. It's pretty ridiculous. Oh, and sorry, they're taking a maximum multiple attack penalty, but at this level, because of the way that I'd be playing this character, his maximum multiple attack penalty would either be -4 or -6.
Right.
Because of the fact that I'm doing this as a ranger. If you don't do this as a ranger, your multiple attack penalty will still be -10.
Right. And for the last one at level 20, I took weapon supremacy. Your skill with weapon lets you attack swiftly at all times. You're permanently quickening. You can use your extra action only to strike.
Yeah, and that makes sense, again, because of that.
Yeah.
So what I did was I took Ultimate Skirmisher, because, again, it makes perfect sense based on the Drizzt concept. You are skilled at navigating the wild. Your movement is completely unaffected by terrain. You ignore the effects of difficult terrain, greater difficult terrain, and hazardous terrain. You don't trigger traps and hazards that are triggered by moving into an area unless you want to.
Right.
Now, is that even the best skill at level 20 for a ranger? No, it isn't. There's a better flurry, which makes it so you only take the first 2 attacks at the first attack penalty, and then the rest at the second attack penalty, which is ridiculously stupid. Right. But either way, it's still very good. Now, the thing is, that's our feat lists. And as you can see, we played this very differently. I made my character more rangery. He made his more fightery because, again, that's what we have available to us. But all of our feats still go quite along well with the way that Drizzt is shown as a character.
But the skill feats in mine also make him a little bit more rangery, because I did take Legendary Guide, Legendary Survivalist, which all really let him...
those do help, but I took the same things.
Right.
So it makes it so my rangery guy is more rangery as opposed to...
Oh, no. Yeah. I'm just saying that no matter which way we went, there is still a tendency towards the ranger aspect.
Exactly. So that gives us, again, there's a lot of skill feats that are going to go that way. Now remember, of course, Drizzt is well known for his survival, his acrobatics, his athletics, his stealth, and his nature abilities. He would probably be, he would have intimidate, but not necessarily be great at it. He would have medicine, but not necessarily be great at it. Like, it's difficult to say what other skills he may or may not have at trained. You can choose, like, I would definitely say survival would probably be his legendary, but stealth he was also always very, very, very good at. So you might, and at level 20, you could have 2 legendary skills. So I would probably have them be nature and survival, with acrobatics being right behind it.
And I totally agree that that's potential. I went with survival and stealth because of exactly why you said.
Yeah, stealth is stealth. Nature should be up there, but survival, stealth, and acrobatics would be my 3 top skills.
Yeah, definitely. So that's the Drizzt and Pathfinder 2. I think we both agree they're not perfect, but they're as good as you could probably do within what Pathfinder 2 allows you and is set the way. So
the other thing, of course, that we do need to mention is the Dark Elf traits, because Dark Elf is obviously not one of the choices.
Right.
What we basically both decided to do was go with the Cavern Elf.
Yeah.
Because of the way that works, and it makes a lot of sense. You just kind of then give it the dark vision. You give it a couple of the extra abilities that a Dark Elf would have. Take away some of the abilities that the regular Cavern Elf would not. You've got to also say, like, how would the magical abilities of a Dark Elf come in? We left some feats available for it. Boris took 3 of his feats available for casting. I only gave myself really 1 feat for it because Dark Elves, for anyone who doesn't know, generally all Dark Elves can cast darkness, or at least all nobles can cast darkness, and all Dark Elves can cast Fairy Fire. Fairy Fire and darkness and basically Drizzt can do both of these at will. Dark Elf nobles can also usually cast Levitate. However, one thing that we learned relatively early in his books is that the Levitate for a lot of the nobles comes from their magic item that comes from their house, which is the reason why when he lost his, he stopped being able to levitate very well. However, that also could be because he was out of practice, because the book kind of says it could be one or both of those two things.
Yep. Yep.
So I was thinking one of those would probably come from being a dark elf, and the other would probably come from taking a dark elf trait, because there are elven traits available to get arcane spells.
Yes. And I took two of them, just like Jonathan said. It's the other worldly magic, that are giving you at first level, fifth, and ninth, I believe, to give you those three capabilities.
Yeah, and we also need to put in, because of the fact that we had a different type of sword, we took the elven weapon familiarity feats. I didn't take as many of the other. He said I really like also, because it does fit in with his character, the 13th level feat Avenge Ally. That is one of the new elf ones. It's a reaction that makes it so that if one of your allies just went down, you get advantage on your next attack, the equivalent of you roll 2 dice and take the higher result when you attack.
Right. And because I took through. Yeah, I didn't take that because I took 3 spell capabilities. So let us know what you think. Let us know, have you tried to play Drizzt in your games? How did that go? Let us know what other big famous character you'd like us to try. Like this video, subscribe, and of course...
come up with some characters that work a little bit better, because we really wanted to try to get this to work, and we took a lot of time in it, but it doesn't work as well as we'd like. Like a lot of famous characters, you need to multi-class, and the Pathfinder multi-class system is very hit or miss. But it was still fun to do. So yeah, if you like it, tell us you like it. If you don't like it, tell us you don't like it and why. I'm Jonathan from Boredom Sated.
Have a good evening.